Hello, everyone. This is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mind Valley and the host of Mind Valley Book Club, and welcome to my weekly interviews. So today I have a very cool book. In fact, a very good thing about me traveling all of yesterday was that I dived into the book. I always dive into the book, but this time I could do it at peace with nobody rushing me on. So it was actually a long day, but exciting day because I was reading the book that I'm going to interview about. So traditionally, if you are connecting from anywhere other than, I guess, Estonia, or maybe if you're connecting from Estonia, it's also fine. Let us know where are you from right now. And also throughout the interview, if you have a question to my guest, please leave the questions. My guest, I actually do not know where my guest is, but I can guess. But we'll ask my guest. So my guest today is Jon Levy. Welcome, Jon, to Mind Valley.
Thank you. And to answer your question, I'm in a small island in the northeast of the US,
And what's the small island called?
Manhattan.
Oh,
Oh,
that's a
you've
great.
heard of it then?
Yes, I guess I have. It's small but crowded.
Yes, very crowded.
That's great. So I suspected you were in US. So we'll talk about John's recent book. So not the only book, but
Mhm.
recent book, Team Intelligence. But first, I'll give a little introduction to my guest. We had a very short chat before going online, but as usual, I do have a little bit of an advantage by reading the book. So authors, whether they like it or not, they do share things about themselves.
Mhm.
So John is behavioral scientist, and he's also the author of, well, New York Times bestselling author of the book You're Invited, and now his newest book is also a national bestseller. It's Team Intelligence. We'll be talking about this book. In addition to that, John actually has a very interesting, I wouldn't call it a project, and probably I'm butchering it, but it's called The Influence.
Hobby, yeah, whatever you want to call it, it's fine.
It's a secret society. Let me call it. It's a secret society. It's called the
Wow.
Influences, and maybe John will tell you about that. But I believe that thanks to that secret society, John has met really incredible people, thousands of incredible people, including Olympic athletes, astronauts, Nobel Prize winners or nominees, and also indulged in not really great dinners. Is that about right?
That's yeah, it's been for the past 15 years I've hosted 431 dinners so far for about 12 people at a time. They come to my home, they cook me terrible food, they wash my dishes and clean my floors, and in the process they find out, because it's anonymous, nobody knows who's coming, that they're sitting with Olympic astronauts, not Olympic astronauts, sorry, Olympic athletes, astronauts, Nobel laureates, the occasional princess, prime minister, everybody from stars of major TV shows to the person who won a Grammy for barking on Who Let the Dogs Out. You know that song?
Yeah. We were discussing with my daughter that it makes sense because that barking actually comes in rhythm. It's not
Yeah.
just random barking. So as you can guess, that talking to a person who manages to not just have conversations and dinners and wonderful time with very accomplished people, but also makes them cook and clean for him. We have a lot to learn. I remember we were just recently at an event, and somebody asked, "So how do you expose yourself to incredible people?" We talk about mentors and people to learn from role models. You see, not only can you be close to these people, you can make them work for you.
It actually turns out that it works better when they do work for you. There's this in my second book, You're Invited, we kind of explore this idea of what actually causes people to connect deeply. And
Mm,
we tend to think that, okay, if I want to win you over, Christina, if I want you to like me, then maybe the best way to do it is by treating you to an expensive dinner,
mm,
and then maybe you'll do business or something like that. The reality is, though, that that's kind of like saying, hey, I know you don't like my personality, but I have Taylor Swift tickets. Do you want to hang out? And people might say yes, but they don't really want that experience. It turns out that what actually causes people to connect deeply is called the IKEA effect. And the IKEA effect is that we care more about our IKEA furniture because we have to assemble it. So by actually having the guests cook the meal together, they care more about each other and me. And
mm.
that's why we're able to create a community, or one of the many reasons that we're able to create a community of people who are so extraordinary, is that rather than trying to win over their interest, we're actually giving them an opportunity to invest effort into one another and care more.
So we'll talk about the book, but this endeavor is just so fascinating. And I know from the book that one of the rules at your dinners is that while the dinner is being cooked, they are not allowed to talk about what they do professionally,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is, yeah.
we did that because, at least in New York, the first question everybody always asks is, "What do you do?"
Yeah.
And we wanted people to come in and have two experiences. One is for status not to matter. So if you walk in and you're the CEO of a company and the other person's an Olympian, everybody's trying to figure out who's the most important. But if that's out the window, then
Mm,
it's not really that relevant, right?
mm,
Now you're just connecting as human beings. The
mhm,
second thing is that I wanted it to be novel. There's a section of the brain called the SNVTA. It doesn't really matter what it stands for, but it's the major novelty center.
mhm,
And when you trigger it, it actually causes people to want to explore and understand. And so by having a design that's completely different than anything else out there, it actually creates curiosity and makes it more memorable.
mm,
And so people who are normally very busy will say, whoa, wait a second, this seems really interesting. I'd like to
mhm.
participate in that. And so suddenly we get a collection of characteristics that come together. And then the third thing is, if you can't rely on your standard like conversation topics, then you have to go through a bit of an awkward experience together to figure out how to connect.
Mm.
And that bit of an awkward experience can actually bond them.
So now I think it's a good time to pivot towards the book, actually,
Mm.
what the book is about, because you did mention that one of the reasons is because we are, whether we like it or not, we are swayed by status, and that does impact how we interact. For example, if you're in a group of 12 people and you know that one of them is, or two of them are super accomplished, there's nothing, I think it's just in our nature to be kind of curious and gravitate into what that's person, and then it becomes a little bit unnatural. So why I'm bringing it up is that one of the premises of your book is that we go about understanding leadership in a very wrong way. We see some characters out there and who have accomplished a lot, and we try to emulate them.
Oh,
So
yeah.
what's wrong with our understanding of leadership in that sense? Why does it not work, and why might it be not productive to, if you admire, say, I don't know, Elon Musk, if anybody admires him right now, but still, business-wise speaking, or Steve Jobs, then you try to do like they do.
And let's be very clear. With all these leaders, there is a lot to admire, and then there's a lot to be cautious about, right? You don't want to put anybody on a pedestal too high because you'll end up trying to mimic characteristics that aren't necessarily healthy. But I think we need to begin by asking, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? So when we look at the entire leadership landscape, people are ultimately saying, I want to produce great results. And most things that we want to produce can't be done alone, right? Maybe you'll figure out how to do a painting by yourself, but if you want to launch a company, it's probably going to involve other people. And so at some point, you're probably going to need to lead something. Now, let's ask what actually matters. And most of the business schools out there and consultancies will tell you that there's a collection of these essential skills. And when you look at them, it's usually a list of like 8 to 12 of them. You go, huh, this doesn't make any sense. The most effective leaders in our society don't have a lot of these skills, right? You've kind of pointed to Elon Musk. He's not known for creating psychological safety or consensus among his leadership. It's almost laughable because it's so outrageous how he behaves. And yet he's really effective. So clearly these aren't essential skills. They're just things that are nice to have. It would probably
Mhm.
be better or more effective if he had those skills, but it's irrelevant because he's not going to change. Trying to mimic things, though, also doesn't seem to work. What we ended up realizing is that there's only one defining characteristic of a leader. And frankly, it's kind of stupid. It's that they have followers. So it's like very self-referential, right? Like you can't have a leader without followers. Makes perfect sense. Now the question becomes then, why do we follow? And what's clear is we don't follow because of a collection of perfectly developed skills that make somebody well-rounded. In fact, the reason that we follow has to do with a very strange behavioral quirk. You said you grew up in Estonia, is that right?
Well, in Soviet Union.
In what? In the Soviet
In
Union. Yeah.
Union, yes.
Okay. So in the US, when people are in high school, let's say 16 years old, and it's Sunday night at about 5, 6 p.m., they get something called the Sunday Scaries. They start getting really nervous for the next day. Does that ever happen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you were 16 and you were in school on a Friday, at about 1 p.m., you were still in class, but how did you feel?
Excited.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? You're
Yeah.
locked in class, you're excited, you're sitting at home free, you're anxious. And that's because human beings do not relate at all to what's going on in the present. They relate to the future that they believe they have. The reason we actually follow someone is that when we interact with them, they cause us to feel emotionally that there will be a new and better future. That's it. You don't need to like them. You don't need to want to hang out with them. And in fact, you will ignore and forgive all of their transgressions if you can make them feel, or if they make you feel, rather, that there's a new and better future. Now, the way that they actually accomplish that is not through some universal set of skills, but rather, Kristina, you are probably not a well-rounded person. You probably have a handful of super skills that are so profoundly strong and disproportionate to your other skills that when people interact with them, they go, wow, with her in charge, I don't need to worry about that. That's why people follow you. That's why they tune into your show. Not because you've got all the perfect leadership skills, but because you have a disproportionate collection of skills. So when Elon Musk is talking, what you realize is that he thinks at scale and he moves faster than anyone in our society. You might think he's a jerk, but those super skills are so profound that when he says, we're going to colonize Mars or put satellites that'll give the world internet, people go, okay, I'll put money down. I'll go work for that. And that's what the core element of leadership is. But I should probably point out one thing.
Yeah.
And that is that just because you get people following somebody doesn't mean they'll be effective. You could have a bunch of idiots following a moron. It doesn't actually accomplish anything.
Yeah, I actually, that was where I was going also to go, because yes, exactly. Just because people believe someone, it is a slippery slope. We can get into trouble by following
Yeah.
someone who paints a very compelling picture of the future. Now, for those of you who haven't read the book, one of the parts which I enjoyed about the book very much was actually how Jon is dismantling this idol that we have created for ourselves, like this ideal leader. And your examples are just wonderful, like really, really unexpected in many ways. And on a side note, I really had to say that I really enjoy the humor in your book, because I understand most of the contemporary nonfiction books have a little dose of humor. But what I like about your humor, it's very, very Estonian in the way that you're not apologizing every time I was joking. You have to, I mean, some of your sarcastic passages, I was just like, I can't believe you didn't even apologize.
Yeah, I know. So this is the funny thing. With nonfiction books, they tend to do two things that I think are really weird. The first is people are so burned out. We don't need another book telling us the dry story of repeating the same examples we've heard 1,000 times. And I said, especially after the pandemic, if we're going to read a book, we need to release a little bit of the pressure and make fun of ourselves. The second thing that became really clear and that annoys me so much about this entire genre, and I'm part of it, right? So I'm also at fault, is that we keep writing these books that say, okay, if you just follow my rules to life, everything will work out. And that isn't reality. Like, things go wrong constantly. So I wanted to, one, make fun of everything. And then the second is I wanted to talk about what do we do when things go wrong? Because they will. And how do we handle it when you have a leader that might be super talented and effective, right? But like Steve Jobs, might be a wild narcissist or even have other dark characteristics that can have a really negative impact on people. All these things are realities. If you've worked in a modern workplace, there's a good chance you've dealt with a toxic boss or coworker. And it's important to know what to do.
By the way, for our audience, I know you guys like this topic, but I think that chapter where you talk about the toxic coworkers and toxic bosses is going to be a favorite. I was just trying to put some of my less pleasant interactions, work-related interactions, into those categories that you shared. But maybe we'll leave it for a little later if we get
Sure.
there. But if you haven't read the book, guys, look up this chapter. I don't remember. It's somewhere past the middle.
I think it's called The Good and the Bad. It might be like chapter 9 or something like that.
It's somewhere there, yes. I'm 100% sure you guys are going to enjoy it. Now, I want to talk about something. So my son is applying to universities right now, and of course he's interested in IT, but as any contemporary young man, he also understands that he has to understand business. Now, there are a lot of American universities which offer business and, let's say, a scientific degree simultaneously. Now, the part which I really found also fascinating was when you talked about how this idea of trying to teach leadership was born and what is wrong with that idea. And I think it's incredibly compelling part, but maybe for the benefit of those who haven't read the book yet, you could explain maybe shorter. So what is the issue? Like, there are so many universities, literally every university has to offer a leadership degree or some kind of management degree. So what's the problem with that?
Well, the first one to do it was Harvard, 1908. And they had this idea that seems reasonable. There's a degree for law, right? Makes you a lawyer. A degree for medicine. Okay, that worked out. And now we're in the second industrial revolution. Companies have grown so much they need middle management. But nobody really took middle managers seriously. The idea that, oh, you don't know how to assemble a car and you're going to tell me what to do when I'm on the front line seemed absurd. And so Harvard said, we're going to create a management degree that will prepare people for a career in managing people. There were two major problems. The first is that law and medicine are mostly based around information, right? Can you diagnose a disease? Do you know the law? Management is human interaction. And there's about 1 billion different ways human beings can be a pain in the butt. And you can't prepare for something like that sitting in a classroom. So the problem became, imagine, Kristina, I wanted to teach you how to drive, right? And I said, instead of putting you behind the wheel of a car, so like you're going to be in the workplace and you're going to have people who you have to manage and you have to figure out how to manage them, and I'll guide you through that. I say, you're going to play the video game Mario Kart by Nintendo. We are going to take you completely out of the environment where everything's absolutely fake and fun and playful, and we'll get you drunk often. And that'll be how you're going to learn to manage people. It doesn't make any sense. The second major issue is that the person who led scientific research there, Dr. Elton Mayo, had faked his credentials, was not a doctor, and had no concept of the scientific method. And it set research back probably like 50 years. And so suddenly you have this perfect storm of terrible ideas and everybody thinking that it's a good idea. Now, listen, you will probably, if you get MBA from a prestigious university, it will probably help your career because it'll tell companies to notice you. But it will not make you a better leader. I'm not saying you wouldn't get better at certain things. It just won't make you a better leader. And herein lies the problem. It's expensive. It's 2 years out of the workforce. And when you actually look at the results, study after study shows that at the 1, 2, 3, 7 year marks, whatever it is, people who have MBAs don't perform any better than those that don't. Mm-hmm. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're looking for a stamp of approval, yeah, go get an MBA, but it has to be from a very prestigious school. You want to actually be a great leader, then you're not going to learn it there. You've got to learn it in another way.
So I have to ask that. For those of you who follow me, you know that I have a soft spot for the whole idea of scientific backing to what we do. And coming from a personal growth industry, I must confess that we're not always scientific, and maybe we don't have to be always scientific. So not with all the topics probably, but we are talking to a person with a science background. And in fact, what I enjoyed about the book is that you are in good hands, as in it is the book which reads. Well, I have to compliment you on that, because it is a rare combination where it does read light and easy, because, as I said, Jon has such sense of humor. I was laughing out loud yesterday, and people were looking at me in the airport, and my family was like, what are you reading? But in addition to that, I really loved all the twists and turns where I was like, where are you taking us? And then when the twist comes, I'm like, okay, I get it. So the point I was trying to make is that it actually gives you also the taste of what it means to be grounded in science. Now, a question to Jon is how much, and I know it's not directly book related, but nowadays with social media taking over and us being frazzled and dazzled by the facades and eloquent speeches, when it comes to leadership and teamwork, how far have we ventured away from what science really understands about human interaction? Because you are a behavioral scientist, you probably look at teams, not just a collection of people, but like in the laboratory under the microscope, like a dissected frog.
Yeah. So it's funny. In full candor, there's people who are much better day to day on research, who just love being in a lab and running experiments. I do research, but I wouldn't want to take credit for the work that they did, because it really is so amazing how we get where we get in terms of one person builds on another or something along those lines, right? And so probably the leader in that topic is a woman named Anita Williams-Woolley. And, one of the things we talked about a few minutes ago is that following somebody doesn't define results. You could have a bunch of fools following an idiot. And when researchers started looking at what actually defines an effective team, they found that it has more to do with the dynamics of the team than with the person leading it. And specifically, Williams-Woolley and her colleagues did a series of experiments measuring a variety of characteristics, right? We're used to thinking of, okay, we want a team to succeed. We need the smartest people, the most talented people. And so they ran these experiments and found that the person with the highest IQ on the team doesn't predict if the team does well. The average IQ of the team members doesn't predict. How much people like each other doesn't predict it. And here's what's really amazing. Kristina, adding you to the team does more than adding me to the team. And what I mean by that is that the greatest predictor was the number of women on the team. The more women, the better the team did in general, up to a limit. Now, I want to emphasize something. It's not a chromosomal thing. It's not like, men, don't worry, you can still have a job. The reason was that women tend to have higher scores when it comes to emotional intelligence. And when you look at what actually happens with a team working, when you have a single person sport or activity like tennis or football, or not football, sorry, tennis or golf, then it's just pure talent or IQ. But when you have a team activity, then you've gone from mostly shooting your shots to mostly passing. Either that's the ball or information. And having somebody with really high emotional intelligence means that they know when to push a topic and when not to, who to go to for which information. They've mapped the unwritten dynamics of the organization and know how to maneuver through them. And suddenly teams begin to perform far better.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean everybody on the team has to have super high emotional intelligence or EQ, but it does mean that we tend to undervalue things that are not as easy to see. So it's easy to see the top salesperson, the narcissist, the loudest person, the extrovert, but not necessarily the people that keep us working well together.
Mm.
And that's a critical skill.
So, for those of you who haven't read the book, Jon does go deep into this idea. Well, all the ideas that we talk about, the book takes them much deeper. Another very great thing about the book is that each chapter is summarized by actionable points, actionable ideas. I also know that Jon has a lot of resources on his own page, and Masha will share probably the link to the page, including some exercises and games and stuff you can do with your team, because the book is about teams, not about leaders. I'm just stuck on the leaders because it's such an fascinating topic. But you know me, I like to interview on a narrow bit of the book and let the rest for you to discover. Now, I wanted to talk about one more myth that you dismantle in your book about the all stars on the team, because this is
Oh, yeah. Isn't that wild?
fascinating. And I've just recently heard about I probably have forgotten all the names anyway, but some great CEOs and former successors teaming up together and announcing that they're coming up with something no idea was actually announced, but they already raised like millions of dollars or hundreds of millions. So why do all-star teams not perform usually?
So the issue comes down to something called the too much talent problem. And that is, the original studies were done on basketball teams and what Europeans would call football or Americans would call soccer teams. And what they discovered was that when you cross about 50% top talent, the team massively underperforms. And that seems counterintuitive because we believe more talent means higher results. What's wild is that that doesn't exist in the game of baseball. There's no upper limit.
Mm-hmm.
And people ask why. And the answer has to do with something called task interdependence, which means that if I'm in a workplace and I do something, does it affect somebody else? In baseball, there's no way to be selfish. There's nothing I can do as a player that takes away anything from you. But
Mm-hmm.
in basketball, if I shoot the ball, that means you can't. And so what we end up discovering is that in basketball, there's actually only one statistic that predicts how much a player gets paid. It is the number of points they score. We have incentivized every player to shoot the ball, even if it's a terrible shot.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it goes in, they have a chance of getting paid more.
Mm-hmm.
There's also only one statistic that predicts if somebody is a effective coach. And that is the increase in the rate of passing under that coach. So let's say, Kristina, you're my coach, and I go from passing 70% of the time to 90% of the time. Now, it means that I'm thinking about the team rather than myself, and the ball can actually get to the player who has the best chance of scoring. And so top talent can only interact if you get them aligned around a common goal, or you offset the team with what's called a glue player, a player that knows how to create stronger connections and camaraderie between people.
So I keep complimenting your book, but I hope it's
I'll
fine.
take the compliments. Don't worry.
One more compliment that I want to share is that I really like the analogies in your book, which make it so vivid and obvious. Now, I can't think about superstars without thinking about super chickens. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
super chicken. Yeah.
Now, they are forever super chickens for me now. And I really love the analogy
Yeah.
with highways because it explains the concept so deeply.
Oh, that's it.
If you guys are confused, it's fine. I think curiosity is good.
Would you like me to tell them a little bit about super chickens?
I think super chickens is fine because I'll probably be using that now from now on.
Fantastic. So I think it was the 1970s or 80s, a company called DeKalb in the US bred like the Ferrari of chickens. This thing could outlay anything. I mean, it was just an egg laying machine. But there was one problem. When you reward pure productivity, then the chickens ended up becoming really violent and pecking at each other. In fact, pecking at each other to death, because the only way they could get more resources at a certain point was that they would get him from the other chickens and take theirs. And so to prevent this, the producers did something awful. They started clipping their beaks. And the humanistic movement was developing at the time, and they said this just isn't okay. And so an evolutionary biologist named William Muir said, we can produce the KGB. Different KGB than in the Soviet Union. This is kinder, gentler birds. And what he wanted to do, or what he ended up doing, was he took a regular crossbred chicken and then created 200 teams of chickens and then just weighed the total output of each team. Now, his view was that if we could teach the chickens to make a lot of eggs, or breed them to make a lot of eggs, and be pro-social, meaning nice to each other, then we'll have the ideal chickens. And so he rebred the top producers generation after generation. After 6 generations, he put them to the test. And what he found were 2 interesting things. The first was if you took a kinder, gentler bird, a KGB chicken, and a regular crossbred chicken, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. But if you actually weighed the total output when they were part of a team, they would demolish anyone in a competition, including the DeKalb XL super chickens. And this was a head-to-head competition over the course of a year. And at the end of the year, the KGB super team beat out the DeKalb XL super chickens because the DeKalb XLs mostly pecked each other to death. And so there weren't many left to even lay eggs. And this is, I think, a great analogy for the modern workplace, which is when we incentivize people on personal bonuses and personal status, at a certain point, they can only achieve that by taking away resources and status from other people. I can only be in the top 10% if I make sure you're in the bottom 90. And then I'll get my bonus. And so we've actually incentivized organizations to do the thing that's worse for them, which is to be selfish.
So an existential question. So if for the person who reads the book does talk about the teams mostly. In fact, as I said, it is how you can make your, well, how you can move towards the super team, not the super chickens. So if you find yourself as this one KGB bird in surrounded by super chickens, what can you do? In a way,
Get out.
a little bit of a that is actually a valid answer, I suppose.
It's not a realistic answer because people have to support themselves. You can maybe plan an exit over the course of weeks or months, but it's not realistic to tell somebody, oh, you're at your dream job, but the people around you kind of suck, so just run away. You may have been working your entire life to get to that role. It's tough for
But
people to just leave.
on a global scale, you might get out of that role and end up in the same environment, especially that some industries are known for super chickens. And if you are in that industry, you're pretty much stuck. So it is a little bit of a catch-22 situation where you, like, do you insist on being who you are? And I'm not talking about authenticity in the way that you talk about in the book, but, stay true to what you believe is right. Or do you play the game because that's a game?
So the answer is that these things are complex. Eventually, if you're in an environment that has a collection of values, there's a good chance that they'll affect you. Mm-hmm. There's a study that I may have touched on in this book. It was from, I think, like the mid 2000s. Researchers were curious if the obesity epidemic is the type of epidemic that spreads from person to person, or if it's like Alzheimer's, a percentage of the population. And what they found was that obesity spreads from person to person. And if you have a friend who's obese, your chances increase by 45%. Their friends who don't, or sorry, rather your friends who don't know them have a 20% increased chance. And their friends have a 5% increased chance. And this is true for happiness, marriage and divorce rates, smoking habits, voting habits, and so on. It's really hard to keep out behaviors when you're in an environment and constantly surrounded by them. So that's probably not realistic. Now, there are those who are really great at bringing people together and making them act like a team. Or depending on your level of influence, maybe you can change the incentive structure and the bonus structure or the status markers that people strive for so that they're actually aligned around the things that matter to you. If we're individually bonusing people and we compliment them for outdoing everybody else, then they're going to keep doing those things, and so will other people. If the status symbol is how much we support people and help them develop, then people will do that more often. And so part of it is social engineering, which is like the status symbols and all that. And part of it is, do we also have these people with high emotional intelligence who can bond the group and get it to perform better together?
So that reminded me that for those of you who do have teams or have some leadership roles, not necessarily at work, because this book applies to social interactions as well and family as well to some degree. So there are a lot of tools for those who have the leadership position. However, I want to ask John, who is your target audience? Who did you write it for, this book?
Oh, wow. I think I wrote it for people who have a desire to accomplish anything faster,
Hmm.
right? No matter what you're doing, unless it's really on a small personal basis, you're going to have to work in a team. That could be raising children, or it could be a project at work, or starting a company, or supporting a nonprofit. And if we don't know what actually causes a team to be effective or how to lead them, then it really limits our ability to produce any result. So at some point, all of us are on teams, and there's this misnomer that leadership and accountability are the same thing.
Hmm.
So if you're at a company and you have a position, senior vice president, right? You are accountable for a result, but you are not leading at all times. You might have a marketing manager that's giving you advice and defining strategy. And when they speak, you might be in charge and accountable for the result, but you're actually following them. So we can never confuse reporting for leading.
Hmm.
And so if as long as you're part of a company, you're going to be leading something at some point. And you need to understand what to focus on and what not to. And then there's this really big issue that we keep being told that we need to focus on things that don't actually make any impact. Is it nice if you can give great feedback? Yeah, but it's not the defining reason somebody will follow you or not.
Hmm.
And if you're just not that person, you don't know how to do it, you're not going to learn it, you're like 55 years old and you're kind of curmudgeon-y, like, stop beating yourself up and say, hey, this is not something I'm going to improve on, but there's somebody on my team who's really good at it. So I'm going to ask them to help me and have them do it. Because that's the point of being part of a team. Everybody brings their own skills.
I have to say that this is such a liberating idea as well, that you maybe don't have to force yourself into something which is so hard for you.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, think about how much shame we have for all the things I can't do in corporate America. There's no way to win that.
So, on a personal note, you really encouraged me to play a little bit more with the glue player role on different
Mm.
teams, because we are parts of different teams, and there is at least one team that I can think of today. We were having a meeting, and I was thinking, if I understood that better, maybe that would be very handy here right now, because we don't always need the credit for the accomplishments. So maybe your next book could be for the aspiring glue players.
The aspiring. They're a really valuable group, and they're often underappreciated. These are the people who often lead from the back. Nobody notices them. They're incredibly generous to the organization. They take action nobody asked them to. They're the ones that connect people, make sure they're cared for, and so on. And they're completely overlooked. But it turns out there's one study done on basketball teams that found that adding a good glue player will multiply everybody else's results by 1.6 times. That's crazy. Nothing multiplies results by that much.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing is that They don't really score very much and they don't have any meaningful statistics, but
Mm.
everybody else performs at a multiple when they're
Mm.
around. It's super cool.
And it's just a wild guess. It's my theory, but I think it's also the role that sometimes, if you have done a lot in your life and you've already already had some trophies, at some point maybe you are interested in a project just because you find it meaningful. So there's a question. I will read out this question. I do have two more questions for John. So
Oh, wow.
the
Okay.
first ones get to ask the question. You should have asked earlier. I mean, we've been here for the past 40 minutes. So the question comes, how can we develop our skills as leaders when AI will be able to do everything better than us soon? Thank you for this question, because my question, my last question before the last one, was also supposed to be to bring in AI. It is impacting teams, obviously. So let it be Alex's question.
Mhm. So I think that we don't really know what to expect in the long-term future, right? 10 years plus. There are a lot of people theorizing, but in the short term, I think that mostly what people are talking about right now is how to replace people. We're in the efficiency stage. The issue is that we're asking the wrong question. The question shouldn't be, how do we replace people? The question should be, how do we make teams as smart as possible to solve
Mm,
problems quickly? And in that case, it becomes more like a bicycle for leadership. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, the fastest animal I think in the world is the cheetah, right? Human beings aren't particularly fast, but if you give us a bicycle, we'll outdo a cheetah or a car, whatever you want to say. I think it will allow leaders to augment their skills, such as, let's say we're in a meeting right now, and I, let's say, didn't have very high emotional intelligence. A good AI agent would support me and say, oh, it looks like Kristina has something to share. You should probably call on her. Or she hasn't spoken much. Or you've been talking for 40 minutes. Maybe you should give some space to other people. And so it will tone down my narcissism or my uh, extroversion to actually allow the team to produce a result faster. And that's what I'm at least hoping for, is that we're definitely not going to be replacing everybody. If you actually look at the major gains that are occurring, we're seeing it on technically repetitive products, and then there's a lot of slop being produced. And then there's also a lot of things that are being, don't get me wrong, there are industries that are fundamentally being affected, television production, things like that. Um, but when it comes to leadership, I don't know if in the next 10 years you're going to be reporting to an AI. That doesn't seem like a thing a lot of companies will feel comfortable with. It's probably more going to be like an assistant or an agent that just supports you. And
mm,
maybe the team will be smaller because you can work so much faster, right? With each person you add to a team, there's an exponential growth in complexity.
mm.
And so having large teams is actually pretty inefficient. I think we cap out somewhere between 10 and 12 people, and then things just go really sour because it's hard to manage that many interactions and relationships between people. And so I think it could actually lead to a greater efficiency. The flip side of it is that there's probably going to be a lot more, you know, very valuable small companies out there. When the barriers to entry are much smaller and people can program without knowing how to program, then you're going to have a lot more entrepreneurial endeavors and a lot more small companies out there feeding the economy.
That's actually nice to hear, and I agree. After reading your book, I also, I mean, if the main definition of a leader is followers,
Mm-hmm.
it would be kind of scary to see AI with a lot of followers.
That you might have like apps that you have to be accountable to and let them know what you've accomplished that day. Like there will be agents, but as far as leadership and direct reporting, it's I think unlikely to happen in the next few years.
Mm. So life will show. We do have to be winding up. So that promised talk about narcissists, psychopaths, and Machiavellians is going to be your homework. Seriously, this is what one of the chapters talks about, and I know that Mind Valley audience is usually fascinated by these topics. And I think it does make a lot of sense, especially after you mentioned that the contagion and the ripple effect of the people in our lives. So it's this is an interesting topic to dive into, but you would have to do
Mm.
it individually because we don't have time to go into every aspect of the book. That's not the only one I left out. So if you haven't gotten the book yet, we'll share the link again. Most of the people will be watching this in recording, so the link will be in the description. I'll probably also be sharing reels at some point. That's, I always do that. So you'll get to your chances, but go get the book. I do have the last traditional question, but before we go into this last traditional question, I want to ask those who are live to leave a heart for my guest, and those who are watching in recording, leave a heart under the video. And my last traditional question is, Jon, how would you like your book to change the world?
Oh, wow. That's a big ask. I would hope that the people who read it begin to challenge the assumptions that they have. That we're constantly told that things work a certain way. And it makes sense because human beings are really fantastic at explaining things, even if they're not true. And what I keep finding is that in the areas that are most important to us, things tend to work backwards from the way we thought they did. And that we've been fed a narrative, not because anybody's trying to do something to trick us or be manipulative, but because it made sense at the time. And they're making money selling that product called whatever, an MBA or a consulting thing. And there's no reason to question it because it's been working as a business. But I would hope that people begin to kind of question things more and ask, like, is that true? What makes us believe that? And hopefully, what they'll find at the other end is being better informed and maybe discovering something that all of us believe the opposite about.
Thank you so much for writing the book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. Guys, I will say it once again. And Jon, if you have your book handy, you can show it because unfortunately, I only get them digitally.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yes, this is the
Oh,
book.
that's my name.
As I said,
Wow.
apart from talking about a very
Mhm.
important issue, something that touches every single one of us, because we are all living and working and functioning in teams. So it is an incredibly important topic for all of us. And apart from it being very practical and scientific, I think my favorite part is your sense of humor. And
Thank you. It's very, very kind. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
you will enjoy it. And for those of you who are watching this video accidentally, sign up to Mind Valley Book Club because this is a completely free service. We do it to make this world a better place, to keep reading alive. That's why we bring you the best new releases. So we only work with the news books. So Jon's book was published this year. We bring you the best new releases. We review everything. We have a team of pro readers who does that. And I have access to the world's best authors. So stay in touch with us, and I hope to see you in a week. Bye bye.